Undoubtedly, in today's world, we live in a tipping culture, but it's also a tricky and sensitive topic for everyone. On today's episode, you'll hear from two wedding planners on what they recommend when it comes to tipping wedding vendors and how to plan for it.
You're listening to The Wedding Whisperer with Sarah Burton of Simply Love Studio in Lexington, Kentucky.
One of the questions that I get asked the most is, which wedding vendors do I tip? That is a great question. And to answer that, I've brought two wedding planners in with me today to answer that question. I have Alainna with Perfect Timing Wedding and Events, and I have Candice Ford with Candice Ford Event Design. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
So I have the newest copy of the Kentucky Bride magazine, and they reached out to me last fall about writing an article. And I chose to write about tipping vendors because, again, most asked question I'm getting these days. So if you have the newest issue of Kentucky Bride, you can check it out. It's the first article in there.
First article, look at you.
Yeah, look at me. But we're going to talk about it more in depth today. And, okay. The first thing I want to start with is the difference between a service fee and a gratuity. And Alainna, having worked at wedding venues before and on the catering side, will you kind of break that down for everyone listening?
Yes. Just first off the bat, if it does not say gratuity, it is not gratuity. So if it says service fee, production fee, coordination fee, that is not gratuity. If you are renting just the venue, from the venue, like you're just the space, it generally should not have a service, production, coordination fee because they are just providing the space. But once you get into the venue that provides catering, linens, tables, chairs, kind of the whole shebang, you'll start to see that. I'm sure, brides that are listening that have been engaged over the past 4 years, they've started to show up more after COVID because that's when a lot of venues got burned with the increasing price of food, linens, table costs. Think of it as an extra safety net. So let's say you have 150 guests at your wedding. The chef should prepare 175. That extra 25 is coming from that service fee, that production fee, that coordination fee. For a venue that provides linens and you spill red wine on it, they're not charging you for that spill or for that stain because your production-free service fee covers that. If they need to rent any extra chairs and tables for your guest count increasing, bringing extra staff in for a lot of moving logistical pieces, even like the admin fee. Brides, might not understand the whole backside of it, but when I ran venues, the contract, the bride, it touched at least 8 different hands. And that just kind of covers all the necessary steps. And I know it's kind of a surprise when you get that and don't really understand what that is, but it's really a safety net instead of charging you line item for line item.
And to think about as a couple, how many different emails and text and phone communication you have with each vendor. And that starts to add up, especially if it is a planner. It can be your venue coordinator. It can be the caterer. All of that is included in your admin fee. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you do end up talking with them so much that they have to add a little bit more for the communication. So try to treat that fairly, I guess. Don't take advantage of that, but know that all of that communication and proposal changes, if you change your budget and they have to change the proposal, every single time that they answer an email or change something for you, that takes away their time, which is included in those fees already.
Yeah, same with switching from plated to buffet due to, budget. That also has the person that works at the venue making changes to their staffing. Just kind of trickles down. So covers it all.
For each of you being planners, full service and partial and month of, what are some of the tips that you have received that maybe are not cash tips?
You go first. I just got done talking.
So some of the tips that I've gotten that were not cash tips, I had a couple make me a care basket once that had wine, gift cards, and a couple other items in it. I had somebody print one of their wedding pictures and mail it to me. It was framed. Yeah, that was really nice. I've gotten just like a singular gift card. So I've gotten a couple of different things, and then just, like cards after the fact. But yeah.
I had a couple a few years ago that went to Hawaii for their honeymoon, and I, 2 weeks after their wedding, got a mysterious package from Hawaii. I didn't really realize what it was. They sent me a plate that someone had like mosaic tiled. And there was a turtle on it. I just thought it was really cute, and that they sent it from Hawaii. It was really sweet. And of course, I get a lot of coffee gift cards. But I've gotten like candles and cute stuff, just things I've mentioned randomly that I didn't think that they would remember. That was really cute.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, it is. And detail oriented too.
Before we dive into the different areas of tipping when it comes to vendors, who actually gives the tip? When is it given? What do you recommend for that?
I've done it a couple ways, but ideally I try to push them towards me providing the envelope to them during the rehearsal, them filling it then and giving it to me before rehearsal dinner. So I have it the morning of. That way I can have it for, hair, makeup. Just I see all the vendors throughout the day. I do like, though, when the dad or the mom like kind of just surprise hands me like 8 stacks of envelopes at the end of the night. I just think it's cute that they thought about it without me even talking to them. But ideally, I would like to have those envelopes the night before, ideally.
So when my clients explicitly ask me about tipping, I will send them a gratuity guide, and it has suggestions on kind of the logistics of that. Most of my full service clients will meet earlier in wedding week, and I'll get all of their items from them, including gratuities. And then I typically pass them out at the conclusion of service with most vendors. With some vendors, I think it's beneficial to do pre-gratuities, but we can talk about that in a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, so typically, and then if it's a day of coordination client, they usually give it to me at rehearsal or like the morning of the wedding, and then I distribute. Sometimes though, I don't know if you've run into this, but like parents are pretty adamant about handing it out themselves.
I know. I think it's cute though.
They're like, I want to make sure that they know that it came from me. So in that case, I'm usually just like, yeah, if you want to do it, that's totally fine. But I'm happy to do it if they want me to.
The only thing sometimes about handing them out, I had a bride in October and her mom gave me all the envelopes and the DJ's was opened. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want them to think I stole money. She was like, oh no, sweetie, we opened it to put more money in it. And I was like, okay. But I'd never want like a vendor to think I'm not giving them their money. So I have them initial that I gave it to them now. Oh, that way there was never any like, any discrepancy of if they got it or not.
That's a good idea.
Started doing that this year. So that one made me nervous. Luckily the DJ was awesome, but I didn't want to think I took money. He opened it, realized I didn't. So,
And then Candice, what were you talking about? Pre-gratuity?
Okay. So especially like for like bar service, I think that doing gratuity ahead of time can sometimes, they're going to do their job regardless, and they're going to be great, but they tend to be a little more friendly.
They know they're making money that night.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I guess.
Yeah. So I think that if you're planning on tipping anyway,
that's really
sometimes it's a good idea to tip them early.
That's a good idea.
And then, but with most vendors, it's like end of the night or end of their Yeah. So like photography, videography, I usually do it after dinner before they're getting ready to leave.
And then talking about bartenders and tips, what are your thoughts on having tip jars at weddings? Would you rather have that, or would you rather have the client pay the gratuity ahead of time?
Coming from a venue as well, I hate tip jars being on the weddings. I think if you spend so much money on a wedding, I don't want it to ever look like you're soliciting tips. I've told bartenders, more times than once, hide that. Like, I don't care if you take tips, but don't solicit them. And then I've seen, money tucked under the mat too, and march over there. Please put it behind the bar. I think it's nice to tip the bartenders, and then if they do get additional tips, that's even better. Yeah. But I am really, really, really against tip jars.
There are always going to be people that tip the bartenders regardless of a jar.
Yeah. I'm kind of indifferent, I think, on tip jars, because I think I would rather see a real tip jar than see like cups of money. that are like apparent from behind the bar.
I would explode if I saw a cup of money.
I want to see the bar look like this. Like nothing.
But I think, yeah, it's nice, which some of my clients, and I think it's totally fine if this is what you want, they will explicitly tell me to tell the bar that they can't have tip jars out.
Yeah.
And I think that that's totally fine because, you know, if you're going to a wedding, but in that case, if you say no tip jars, I do think that you should do gratuity for sure. And it should be like, it should account for the fact that you don't have tip jars out.
It also kind of depends on the vibe of the wedding. Like if they decide to have a cash bar, I think there should be a tip jar at that means.
In that situation, yes.
Hands.
Yeah.
And I've seen them a lot for like nonprofit events where, you know, 2 drink tickets are included. And then, so I think for those.
Because I'll say from like many moons ago when I worked at a winery and did some weddings with them, sometimes the clients would say, I don't want a tip jar out, but then they also would not tip. And there was no fail safe. And those bartenders were making $8.50 an hour.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I don't know how to recover from that.
We're gonna tip the bartenders regardless. Tips are just extra.
Yeah, typically I know type A, if there's not a tip jar, I think it may automatically be included just to make sure it's covered. But yeah, tipping the bartenders ahead of time, it's a great idea.
That is a good
especially
idea.
if it is warm outside or it's super hot in the venue, just to take extra good care of them because they are hustling. And when you think about tipping, I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is going to be your hair and makeup on the wedding day. A lot of hair and makeup artists will have gratuity in their contract. We have some artists here that work kind of like under an agency, and then we have some that own their own business. And so it is different for everyone. So that is one place you definitely want to check your contract to see if it's in there before the gratuity. What are your thoughts on a percentage of gratuity for hair and makeup if it is not in the contract?
So I definitely always review the contracts first because, like you said, some artists include it, some don't. And I mean, personally, when I get my hair done, I do 20%. So I tell my brides to 20% if they're able to. I also ran into a couple weeks ago the company that had multiple artists. They just had one Venmo for the whole group. So I don't know if they split tips at the end or how that works.
Okay.
But I wasn't given any other Venmo names, just the one. So we have to take that into account too.
That's interesting. Okay.
I wasn't there for the getting ready portion of it, but I say 18 to 20% if you like it. Like if you like it.
So then here's our question for that. Are we paying the gratuity on just the bride's hair and makeup, or are we paying it on the entire wedding party?
Oh, I think full service.
Okay.
But I differ a little bit in that I think anywhere between like 10 to 20% is appropriate for day of services. Because a lot of times, like, well, if you have the full wedding party getting ready, and a lot of hair and makeup artists won't allow you to split up payments.
Right.
So if that bride is tipping on the full service, I mean, she's tipping on potentially like $3,000 worth of service. So I definitely think that's, in my opinion, a mandatory gratuity, but I think that it's flexible. Like if you're happy with the service, 15 to 20%, I think is appropriate. If there were a lot of issues or like failure with communication, like trouble with your trials, stuff like that,
I agree.
it gets a little more flexible for me. Or if, like, for example, I had a client that had a makeup artist that the client said that their deposit was included, like that covered, or I'm sorry, the makeup artist said that their retainer was like it went towards services. And then day of, she said, no, it does not go towards services. And the full balance was due.
Oh, wow.
And that bride decided not to tip. And in that situation, I think that's appropriate.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
See, this is why I asked you two to be the guest on this, because I knew that you would be honest and I knew your opinions would vary a little bit, but I appreciate the honesty. In that scenario, I would have probably done the same thing.
I just think if you feel pretty that day, it kind of makes or breaks your day. That's why I think you should charge a little more for tips.
So then for hair and makeup, a lot of times the trial is included in the bride's price.
Yes.
So do we tip at the trial at all, or do we wait until the day of and tip on the total that day?
I wouldn't tip on the day of the trial. I would just be like, hey, girl, I'm on my way. You want me to get you a Starbucks on the way there? Like, I would say something like that, probably. That's what I do with my hair person. But
Yeah, I would, if it is a separate charge and you are billed at trial, I could understand, like, especially if you're paying with a card and it gives you the option to tip, you could go ahead and tip on that and just keep that in mind when you're tipping day of, or like day of the wedding. But no, typically, since it is all billed at once, I wouldn't think to bring gratuity to the trial.
Okay. And I feel like another area that we talk about a lot is the officiant. A lot of times a couple will use maybe a friend, or they will use a pastor at a church. And so they're like, the pastor is already getting paid by the church to be there. So what are your thoughts on like a pastor versus someone that is a hired officiant versus a friend?
I think there needs to be a gift of some sort across the board. So whether they are hired or they're a friend, because at the end of the day, you are not married without them. So kind of
important.
Yeah. So I personally, especially if you're not paying them, like if it's a family friend, I would do gratuity, or if that is uncomfortable, I would give them a substantial gift.
Not just an invitation to the wedding, but like an actual. I agree. 100%.
Like a nice bottle of bourbon, or like
tickets somewhere.
Yeah. Something substantial.
Yeah.
For the contribution to your wedding, especially if they're not charging you.
I really appreciate hearing other planners' opinions, because this isn't really something I feel like that's talked about a lot. And a lot of times when I meet with a couple, they will say that their friend is marrying them, and so that's not going to cost them anything. And I'm always like, well, it's going to cost them probably 2 hours of their Friday night for rehearsal, and it's going to cost them their Saturday. And just because you're feeding them a meal, they would have already been a guest anyway. Like they've put some time and some effort into it.
Also, if they have to get like newly ordained just to marry that couple, it's a lot of work,
and it's a lot of pressure. Like my husband's ordained, and that's fun. He won't be doing it. He won't be doing it for anyone. He's done it like 3 or 4 times, and it tears him up so bad. Like his stage fright is so bad that when you ask someone that you love to do something so important, they are going to feel obligated to do it regardless. And I mean, I think that you should show that you appreciate that they've done that for you.
I agree.
Yeah. And the big one is going to be catering. You talked about in the beginning the different types of fees. I talked with Shana last week, or on our last podcast, about her fees, but they do have a 20% service fee that does not go toward their gratuity. She said anywhere from like the $50 to $100 range. And again, that kind of goes back, I think in my thoughts, is to the venue and the work. I know like Casey from Bayou, one of their sales managers, posted her steps from her wedding on Saturday. And it was like $27,000.
I've never reached that.
Really? Just give it.
Yeah, no.
Even at Castle and Key?
Oh my gosh, Castle and Key.
I
walked
didn't have
out
an Apple Watch then. So
okay.
I don't know.
I
probably would now.
So I didn't have an Apple Watch. I just had my phone in like my leggings pocket.
My phone with me.
36,000 steps at Castle and Key.
Okay, well I got one coming up in August, so I'll
So yeah, 36,000 steps, and that's for your wedding planner. And your catering staff is going to be somewhere along
straighter.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're walking a lot more because they kind of have to aimlessly go around the venue, like picking up plates and stuff. Like I'm at least walking with the purpose of like, I'm going to get this done.
Yeah.
And then I can stop for a second. They are walking the whole
And if they're
reception.
fixing food on site or even in their kitchen in the heat, all of the things. So taking care of your catering staff is very important.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said about like the location. I also think it depends on the type of event. Like if it's just a cocktail, like hors d'oeuvres hour only, I think it should differ a little bit than a plated. The one thing I do appreciate is full transparency from the catering company, though, as to how many chefs, leads, servers will be there. I don't like to go off of the BEO. Sometimes that's not always updated, coming from a venue owner or venue worker. It's not always accurate. So I do like transparency so we can make sure everyone's accounted for, because sometimes they might have more, and I would hate for one person to be left out.
So at what point do you think you would have that final number of staff that day?
I mean, people could call in Saturday, to be honest, but I like to reach out to the catering company Wednesday.
Okay.
And then Saturday, I can shoot a quick text. We still at 12 or whatever.
Okay.
I can tell Dad to run to the ATM or something.
And this was, again, something we talked about on Bayou's podcast is cash for your service staff is usually preferred. I don't even know other options. Like, I probably wouldn't write a check. And it's something, if you don't have the cash to give them that day, I would probably circle back around with cash that week. Maybe have your parents or something stop by.
I would, so in my opinion, like if you don't have the cash to tip all of your vendors, you should prioritize catering.
Agree.
For night of, because it is difficult to track everyone down after the fact. And with some, I feel like sometimes with catering companies, they use staffing agencies. So that person might not work there again for months.
One thing too, that I really like to get, into the conversation pretty early with brides or their parents about tipping is when you hand me $800 in like $100 bills, I can't break that between 12 people. So I like to say let's decide on a number and let's do that times how many people are working with envelopes. I can write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever on it. The venue doesn't always have change either. And then it makes me feel like I didn't really give the people.
It's just kind of like the Venmo situation.
Yeah, I just handed someone an envelope, which I trusted people I handed to, but I would like to hand each person a thank you at the end of the night. So exact change is kind of a thing for me.
And I also think that, if you have not budgeted appropriately for your gratuities at the end, when all is said and done, even if you tip less, doing individual thank yous for each staff member goes a long way. Because I know personally for my wedding, I did individual gratuities for the catering staff, and I wrote their names on thank you cards, and they brought it up to me like 3 or 4 times after that, how much they appreciated that. So I think especially if you don't feel, if you went a little over budget and you don't have the cash flow that you thought you'd have for gratuities, even if you tip less, just doing something sweet and being thoughtful and like putting their name on the card, or at least like an actual note instead of a tip full of cash with nothing else.
I will say too, I know after you recover from that initial wedding budget, you get back from your honeymoon. I've had brides write me, a check of $1,200 and say, hey, add this to your employees' paychecks. And a few weeks later, they'll say, hey, I got a tip. What's that from? And I'm like, oh, the Smith wedding. And they're like, oh, wow. So that's also okay. If you don't get the tip, that day, you can mail it a month or two.
That doesn't mean
later.
You're not going to get it.
Right. Yeah. You can always, mail it later if you want to. Yep.
Enjoy a beautiful getting ready space in downtown Lexington filled with natural light and charm with your bridesmaids on your wedding day. Located on Maxwell Street, a mile from dozens of wedding venues, is a little white cottage with a pink door. Studio rental includes access to the entire cottage, including a main room, a sitting room, a kitchen, a pampering room, and more. The studio is owned by Franzetti Photography, so you know the light is perfect for getting your hair and makeup done and your getting ready images. With one convenient all-day rental, you can start as early as you need and leave as late as you want. For more information, go to franzettiphotography.com.
And then once we have kind of those main areas, we kind of get into photography and videography. And we talked about this before we started recording, how sometimes on a wedding day, the timeline, we have an idea of what the timeline is going to be. It could go well, or it could just be way off. You just never know. And sometimes the photographer and videographer have to stay an extra 30 minutes to an extra hour for whatever reason to make up for that. Some of them may charge you for that, and some of them may just give you a courtesy. What are your thoughts on if that photographer was kind enough to give you that courtesy time and not charge you versus if they charge you for it? Would you tip them? Do you tip a photographer and videographer at all? And then when they go above and beyond, what do you do?
So I think that your first question, like,
All right.
if they charge you versus if they don't charge you, I would not expect a photographer or videographer to stay past the time that they are contracted. And if they agree to do that and they tell me what the rate is, I'm going to tell the client. And then if they charge like that's their time. They deserve to charge for that. So I wouldn't say that would rule them out of getting a gratuity, because they're still going above and beyond by even agreeing to stay past their contracted time. But especially if they don't charge you, or if they're just doing things that are not really their job. Like, I'm trying to think of a situation where this would happen with one of my weddings, because with me being the wedding planner, like, a lot of the stuff like getting drinks and grabbing a change of clothes and stuff like that, that's not something that your photographer should be expected to do. But I've worked with photographers that have essentially had to be the wedding planner because there's not a wedding planner. And if your photographer and videographer go above and beyond, even though they are charging a rate that they think is appropriate for their services because they are most likely self-employed, I still think that it's a nice gesture.
I agree.
To give gratuity.
And I think maybe one area that probably gets tipped the least amount is your florist and designer. I think maybe just sometimes where they come in on the wedding day, they set up and they leave, they're gone. And maybe brides just don't think about that.
I think, this is a personal opinion. Besides the venue and the catering, usually they're one of the most expensive. I think it's just kind of like you said, a drop and go. There's not a face they see. So I think it's kind of like an out of mind, out of sight. But to me, that really just shows how quick and efficient and professional they are. If they're able to be in and out in an hour and have their setup done, like a little secret, little spy in there doing its magic. I don't honestly know if I've ever had a bride tip a florist, to be honest. I'm trying to think about it.
I've had brides tip their florist, and I have a recommendation for it on my gratuity guide. I kind of treat it the same way I see photography, videography, like my services, where I charge the fee that I think is appropriate. I by no means expect gratuity, and I don't think most florists, DJs, photographers, videographers expect it either, but I kind of have that at the same rate. So with those vendors, my suggestion is not like a percentage. I usually say like somewhere between, $50 to $200, like for your main shooter for photography and videography, like $50 to $100 for your second shooter. And then for a florist, somewhere between like $50 to $200. And then I also, if I know that the florist is not doing the drop and that they have a team coming in, I will just let the client know, like, you're going to have a team of 3 coming in to set up if you want to do like delivery gratuities, because some of my clients tip deliveries.
That's nice. That had never crossed my mind, to be honest.
Like cake delivery, rentals.
I will definitely tip some rental guys for moving some stuff. That for sure.
Especially like putting the tents up in the summer when it's 100 degrees
and the dance floor.
Yes.
Well, I also, used to do some accounting work for a rental company. So I see how hard those people work.
It's hard work.
Yeah, no, I definitely, Or bring them treats the next Monday. I
feel like that is actually an area that is very overlooked and not thought about a lot. Just because they come in, they do it, they leave before you're ever even there. Mm-hmm. So. One thing you mentioned was the DJ. Mm-hmm. I think that is probably one of the areas too that has tips that are all across the board.
All across.
Yeah, everywhere from $50 to, you mentioned one of yours got $800. That's incredible. That does not happen every weekend by any means. And I've asked a DJ for my article, I was like, what are some of the tips that you've gotten? I mentioned like bourbon was a very popular one.
That's cute.
Apparently every vendor runs on coffee. So gift cards to coffee shops are very popular. Yeah. And 2, if the tip's not in your budget, it's okay. We understand that. Take care of your catering staff, take care of your bartenders. I think those are really at the top. Your officiant, especially if it's a friend, somebody that's not charging. And the one thing we talk about a lot are reviews. Leaving reviews for your wedding vendors is crucial. Google, Zola, Wedding Wire, The Knot, Facebook, anywhere else that you can think.
I'll just take a Facebook and to my Instagram, but I wish I had a review. Yeah. Google for sure.
And you can copy and paste that same review everywhere. And I think too, if you cannot leave a 5-star review for your vendor, please reach out to them. Please let them know ahead of time. before you post something. And if it's something that they can make right, give them an opportunity to make it right before you do leave any type of 4-star or less review, in my thoughts.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you might be unhappy with something and they didn't know that. And it might be something that they can take care of even after the wedding.
Oh, yeah. I do want to say one thing about stationary tipping. I know I kind of talked a little about before. I had a bride that got all of her invitation RSVPs, all those save the dates from Minted, and she's kind of in a pinch for printing and really wanted like calligraphy on the envelopes. And I was like, I know the perfect lady for you. And I connected them, and she was able to, have all of that done for 200 guests in like 2 weeks, which is crazy. Like she told us 3 weeks, she got it done in 2. And they messaged me and said, like, what do you think about tipping her? And I said, I don't know that I've ever tipped stationery. I said, but, she kind of saved the day. So I think you should. So just those unspoken vendors, I don't want to say unspoken, but just those little moments that you might not think of, those little save the days, like that was a big win. Like I think she definitely deserved a tip or a gift card or something.
Yeah. I think there are so many vendors for every wedding that go above and beyond. And we do so many things behind the scenes that couples never even know about. We work with each other. We make phone calls. We make, send messages and just make things happen. And I think sometimes couples think things just happen. It's just poof and things happen.
Yeah.
But if there's ever somebody that intentionally made something happen to make your wedding better, your planning easier, just say thank you for that.
Absolutely. I mean, I've even like rented a little welcome sign from you before, like the little arch.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to have one by then. Don't worry. And it came to the wedding day and she was like, so do you have the arch? I was like, Candice, did you have that arch right? So little save the date moments. Like, I don't think I tipped you. I'll get you a call.
Oh my gosh. No.
She saved.
See, and I do like how I was just like, oh my gosh, no. For a lot of things, I would never expect gratuity for that. And I do signage for some people just hire me to do signage and they don't hire me for their wedding. And I would never expect, even if I deliver it, I'm like, you've already paid me for it. Like, why would you tip me for that? Because it's a physical good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like a service. I'm not spending, till 2 a.m. working on arranging your menus. I'm just bringing them to the venue.
And I think, too, one of the things is not telling a vendor that you're going to tip them after the wedding in either A, you don't actually mean that, or B, you think there's a chance that you might forget that.
Oh, do not tell someone that you are giving them gratuity if you are not. That is something I'm very adamant about.
Yeah,
like even if you think there is a small chance you will forget to do it, do not tell somebody that you're going to do gratuity unless you have it in hand to give to them.
Yep. I'm glad we're all so passionate about this.
Yes, it would be much better for it to be a surprise than for you to think that it's coming and then it never did. Because I have had someone do that to me and I just am sitting there thinking like, oh, they must not be happy anymore. What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Like just don't bring it up if you are not going to do it or you don't have it right then. I think if you don't have it right then, don't bring it up.
I wouldn't bring it up.
Like, yeah.
I did a wedding last April. And then we had tea with her in December. And she gave me my tip in December from her April wedding because she forgot to give it to me. I didn't know it was coming, so I wasn't like expecting it. But I was like, that's a nice little couple $100. Thanks, Danny.
Yeah.
It's okay to send tips 8 months out.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay.
We know you have to recover. It's,
yeah. Don't use your wedding money like that you got that night.
I think build tips into your budget. Like
that's fair.
Budget 10% of your, which I know that seems high, but like 10% of your total wedding budget. And then if you don't end up using it all towards gratuity, you can use it on something else.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's a really
because it is very stressful. Because if you think about it, let's look at catering alone. Even if you're not tipping a percentage and you have 16 staff members and you're giving...
It's at least $800.
At least $800. That adds up if you do that for all of your vendors. Mm-hmm. So I have some clients that they've told me what they do is they just set aside cash like from every paycheck that they're just putting to the side in an envelope, and that's their tip money envelope. And whatever's in it gets split between everybody in
that's nice.
Whatever makes the most sense.
Has that ever been an awkward conversation for you? like to tell them like you should tip?
No, I mean, so my gratuity guide, I personally think at the end of the day, it is at the client's discretion. And because even though I think you should tip your catering, a lot of people don't do it. Let's just be honest. A lot of people don't. And at the end of the day, it's up to you. It's your money. You can do what you want with it. But I think that if you go ahead and build in for gratuity, it doesn't feel as stressful the last 2 weeks stuffing those envelopes if the money was already accounted for. Because if you're pulling it out of the ATM a week before the wedding, that feels like a big hit. Yeah.
That's true. That's really good advice about building into your budget. I saw it come out in the air. I don't know.
It's just extra because let's be honest, even if you build it into your budget, you're probably going to go over budget. Everybody goes a little bit over budget.
Cash doesn't count.
Girl math. Yeah.
It's fine.
Right. Any final words, any vendors that we haven't talked about you want to mention when it comes to gratuity?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that anyone that is a live talent, so live musicians, whether they're string musicians at your ceremony or it's a band or you have a magician performing.
Artist,
I think that any live talent should be given gratuity, in my humble opinion.
Do you still do the 10 to 20% range?
Yeah, it depends. So, for example, like on my gratuity guide for string musicians, I have like a $25 to $50 per musician. Yeah. So even if it's not, because bands can be really expensive, I'm not expecting anybody to tip their band 20%, but like $100 per artist.
Yeah,
I think it's a nice gesture, and it is very taxing to get up on that stage and do that. So
for sure.
In an ideal world, what would you like to receive at the end of the wedding?
Honestly, I don't care. Like if it's a $50, a Starbucks gift card, $100, just like, this is going to sound so cheesy, but like just being appreciated and knowing that my service was appreciated. Like I would prefer that over somebody just haphazardly handing me like 5 crumpled.
It's so funny
bills.
the mentality that we have, because I was the same way.
Yeah.
And I had a couple that came back a couple of years later for like a retirement party and stuff. And just like them coming back for another event, like meant the world to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I think planners are just like that. Like we just want to see everybody happy and to know that we did a good job. And to have like when we wake up to that 5-star review, like that was more than any gratuity could have been.
I sent one to you. I was like, look, I got one. When I coordinated venues, I only got a tip once. It was from a dad. The planner was just shouldn't have been a planner. So I saved the day, and I very much was like, you better tip me. He did. So I was really happy. But venue coordinators, I honestly don't tip them. But I think if you connect with someone, regardless of what vendor they are, if you really connect with someone, you build a relationship through your planning process, just show them you appreciate them, like you said.
Yeah.
My last wedding in April, the last song was Country Roads, and I'm from West Virginia. So she brought me on stage and said, everyone, this is our planner. She did such a good job mid her day. And I was like, oh, God. And then they gave me money and a Starbucks gift card. I was like, this is great. Ideally, I would love a Starbucks gift card if I'm being honest. Like 100% if I'm being honest, that's what I want. I really do. Because the money that you give me, that's where it's going anyway. So ideally, I would love a Starbucks gift card and a handwritten note and a review.
Okay.
And then post all over Instagram and tag the crap out of my Instagram name.
And that talking about tagging, that like whenever you post your wedding photos, tagging your vendors in that literally takes you less than 10 seconds to do and means the world to your vendors.
And all 8 are going to share it. So all their followers are going to see it. Yeah. Reshare.
And talking about all the different options you like, I had a best man once mention how well the wedding had gone, and thank you to the wedding planner in his speech. And I was like, goals right there. I just did that.
Yeah, that's cute.
Like things like that are so little mean so much.
Wasn't expecting it, no.
And then, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I had a father of a bride, it was like maybe a month after the wedding. he sent me an email and he said, I hope to see you again, not too soon, like talking about his youngest daughter. And it was a really sweet email. And I was like, see, those are the things that really, really stick with you, which I'm not going to say I'm not thankful for cash gratuity.
Absolutely.
Like, who would not be thankful
But the
for that?
email from a dad, that's
like,
precious.
it's so sweet.
That is cute.
Yeah.
That's really cute.
Okay.
So you mentioned venue coordinator. What do you think is an appropriate amount to tip a venue coordinator if they kind of save the day and go above and beyond?
Am I allowed to tell you what I got from that dad?
Sure.
He gave me $300 and a big old hug.
Okay.
Sweaty old hug. Usually the venue coordinators, they're newer. There's a lot of turnaround in the venue industry as far as venue coordinators. So I think anything from $50 to $100 means a lot for a recent graduate. Also, like a nice email or a written note to the event department so their boss can read it, I think it goes a long way as well. I would probably rather prefer that. I would love to read a note that gets mailed from a parent about one of my event coordinators if I was still running the venue. But I got a lot of money that day. Cool. I was really happy.
I also think when the venue and the catering company and the bar service, like they're all the same vendor, your main point of contact is wearing a lot of hats.
That's also true.
So I think that it's nice to tip that person, and typically a little more than you're tipping like the rest of the staff. Especially if it's like a venue like the Castle or the Apiary. Yeah. Like,
I agree with that.
They do a lot.
I call that person like the lead. So that's when I ask like the lead, like, hey, how many leads are there tonight? Yeah, I agree with that. I was talking specifically when I just ran the venue with just tables and chairs.
Like day of, like you were just there to make sure the building didn't burn down and like
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, there were many hats, like they're your planner without a planner.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a planner, that's kind of your planner. So there is a difference for sure. I know we've talked about that before. But they still do a lot for you. They plan your catering side of it for sure.
Yeah. I'll say, so like venues where they have a point person that's just there to refill toilet paper and, you know, make sure that you have access to your green room and make sure trash isn't overflowing, stuff like that. That is not like, if you want to tip them, great. I think that's awesome. But that wasn't what I was talking about. Like,
No. I was doing that role once and had to jump in to be a planner and send people to aisle and fix linens and do all the things. That's why I was like, I better get a tip.
yeah.
But yeah, I agree.
Perfect. So I'll totally change the subject before we wrap it up. What are some of like maybe your top 2 moments from a wedding that you remember that are just incredible?
Oh gosh. The one that got the huge tip, the DJ that got the big tip, I'm not joking. I have never seen a dance floor like that in my entire life.
Was it just packed?
Oh my gosh, yes. Not one person sitting down. Even like the 60 plus folks. Nothing against you. They just like to chat. Everyone was on the dance floor the whole night. I've just never seen a dance floor like that. It was really good energy in there. I love the positive energy, like as a closing note. I don't know. Like, the question caught me off guard.
I know. And I'm like, what can I think of?
Let me just think through all the weddings I've ever played. I guess I just like to see the couple's personality come out that day. Like talking to them for a year and really getting to know them. I just like seeing them be themselves. Like, I don't know. Just really in the moment. Oh, that's a top 10.
Sweet.
I don't know.
Candice, do you have any other fun moments?
Okay, so that one is definitely one of the top ones. That speech was so good. Everybody was laughing so hard. It was great. I won't say from a specific wedding, but a few of my weddings, I've had like the ballroom reveal before.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Like at the tail end of cocktail hour before we let people in. And some of my couples, like their reactions have been so sweet. Like they're just in awe. And like a groom that's had no idea what was going to
showed up.
He had no idea what it was going to look like. And he's like, wow. And he'll look at his bride and he'll be like, you did really good, babe. Like this looks really good. And I just think that's really sweet.
That is cute.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. I know that this will be very useful to a lot of people, and they will be able to better prepare their budget to take care of our local vendors and share their appreciation with them.
Yeah, I agree that planning the budget was really helpful tip.
Good. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
For more information about Simply Love Studio or to schedule your wedding consultation, go to simplylovestudio.com.